And joining us now, international spokesman for Israel's Defense Forces, Major Doron Spielman. Major Spielman, thank you for being with us this morning. I'll pick it up right there. Do you all have a sense for where some of these 100 or 150 hostages are? And if so, are you preparing missions to rescue them?
So first of all, when we say the word hostages, we have to understand that this whole state of Israel is really maybe the size of New Jersey. You're talking less than 10 million people. And these hostages, everybody in Israel either has a family member who is a hostage, knows somebody who's a hostage, or has a son or a daughter or a father or mother who are now have been called up to the front lines because of the situation. And so it's a very personal situation right now. These hostages are literally everybody's family. This is a top priority for the state of Israel. There's no question. We have operation teams that are being headed by generals that have been created that are combining both intel and ops to identify the hostages and everything else that goes around that. And of course, this is a major element of our operational scenario. At the same time, we have the back end. Every one of these hostages has families. Some of their families have been destroyed. It could be a remaining 3-year-old brother, but we have an entire, almost a ministry set up right now to deal with that entire back end. So as we look on our operational objectives, first and foremost, it's clear we have got to destroy completely Hamas's ability to ever do this again. If they think that by displaying the hostages or that hostages are going to help them in this respect, they're wrong. It's clear that they are an evil that absolutely needs to be truly defeated.
So, Major, in terms of that fact, the need to destroy Hamas and balancing the effort to save the hostages, what are you saying to the families when you communicate with them about the very latest in the efforts? How do you explain this balance?
Again, in many of these cases, I have to tell you, these families, and I've met the families, it's hard to believe, but many of these families who have people who've been taken as hostages, their other children are right now in the army that are part of the fighting force of the state of Israel in many, many, many cases. It's a very, very personal situation that they're torn in both ends. On one hand, they have people who are missing. On the other hand, they have people who put on a green uniform and were all of a sudden called to service. What they know and what the people of Israel are unified by is that we know that Hamas as an entity, the massacre that they carried out 7 days ago, they revealed their true face. We've been saying for years to the world, this is what we thought they were. We were even shocked by the gravity and just truly the cruelty of what they did. Everyone is unified, including those families, that Hamas has got to be removed from the scene because we can never allow this to happen again in the future. We have to do this very, very carefully with enormous care and precision. It's not going to be an overnight campaign. This is a war. We are at war right now, and the war is what it's going to take to defeat them.
And Major, that obviously leads to one of the big concerns. David Ignatius with the Washington Post wrote that that Israel's macabre mission impossible is to destroy the terror networks, to crush Hamas, to make sure they can never do it again, but at the same time, protect civilian lives, protect Palestinians whenever you can. Could you, just for Americans that are watching, and then we'll see strikes against buildings in Gaza, can you explain what those targets are that you were striking out against? And can you also explain what Israel is doing to minimize civilian casualties while trying to degrade and destroy the Hamas terror network?
Absolutely. And we have to understand that Israel is in a state of war. After the massacre that was inflicted, we've clearly said there's been a paradigm shift here. We are absolutely clear with ourselves and with the world that we are going to destroy Hamas's capabilities completely. At the same time, Hamas, we have to understand the situation that we're in. Hamas came over our border and massacred Israeli civilians. They then ran back over their own border, hid inside of their basements, and told their wives and children, go to sleep upstairs just above us in the apartment block above us. Meaning the cynicism and the kind of the how grotesque that is hard to put our hands on, but they've created a situation of terror on our side and terror on their side. Every single one of our targets is a military target that has been vetted with intelligence. Now, and whenever we can, we notify the civilian population in Arabic. This can be done via messages on phones. This can be done via leaflets. When we can, we fire warning shots and we ask them to clear out of the area as much as possible. I only wish that if Hamas, who claims to be the champion of the rights of the people in Gaza, cared about them even a little bit, that they would understand how important it is for them to separate them from the scene of fighting. The question really needs to be addressed to Hamas, because they knew when they did this that we would have to come after them like any country would, and they're putting their own families directly above them.
And Major, if you could, I'm sorry to make you explain things that seem so basic to you, but for Americans watching, if you could explain for those that are saying Israel is a great occupier of the Palestinian people, can you explain that Israel turned Gaza over to the Palestinians in 2005? They've had one election since then, and really the greatest victims of Hamas have been the Palestinian people, who have watched them forego aid, forego international help, forego the ability for Hamas to actually be growing and thriving, because their singular obsession is on killing Jews and destroying Israel.
I absolutely could not agree with you more, and I'll tell you from a personal outlook. I was there the day that we literally pulled our families out of Gaza. I knew people in Gaza. We pulled them out. They understood at the end of the day, this is for the peace of Israel. We had reached a safe area outside of Gaza, and all of a sudden we hear warning sirens and rockets begin falling. And maybe in almost naivete, we're looking up at the sky trying to understand, wait a second, we just pulled out of Gaza. This is 2005. There's not an Israeli left in Gaza. Why are they shooting rockets? And then we've seen the images from that point on, all the humanitarian aid, the electricity, the power, the cement, instead of going into hospitals and in universities to advance their own civilization, their own population, they've been used to create tunnels, to ferry weapons, send terror attacks and rockets back into Israel. As you mentioned, they had one election. Their opponents were thrown off the roofs of buildings in Gaza. That is what they did with the other party, not much of a democracy. And since then, the people of Gaza truly are the victims of Hamas. Hamas, as you mentioned, it is almost like a cult that is dedicated to death. It is the death of the Israelis, absolutely. And indirectly, or perhaps directly, it is the death of their own people. Their people cannot move forward. Even the humanitarian aid crossings at areas, which I have been to so many times, with all the trucks of humanitarian aid and the fuel for the Palestinian people, that was one of the very first places that Hamas bombed. They killed the troops, they killed the people attending, and they bombed the crossing, so no humanitarian aid can reach their own people. That is the situation in Gaza, and there's not been an Israeli living inside of Gaza for almost 20 years. There's no occupation of Gaza.
Yeah. You know, Willie, it's the one thing I've been talking to leaders in Republican and Democratic administrations that have wrestled with this problem since 2005, and they all say the same thing. Any funding that gets in there, any supplies that get in there, if they put in supplies for bridges, they're immediately constructed into war tunnels. Everything is converted by Hamas. So any aid meant to help the people end up going into their war-making machine. It's just they haven't cared about the Palestinian people in Gaza, and they never will, because it is a cult of death, where their goal is, and they say it, their goal is to kill Jews.
Yeah, that's right in the charter when the organization was born, and also using their own people as human shields, even as we speak. Major, there's been some dispute about the role of Iran in the savage attack of last weekend. We know, of course, that Iran backs Hamas. There's no doubt about that, with finance and weapons and everything else. But the question is, was there a direct order from Iran? Was there a green light for this attack over the weekend? So what is your sense of that? Is there, in fact, evidence that Iran directed this attack through Hamas on Israel?
Iran's involvement in the Middle East and with the regimes that are attacking Israel is not even a secret. We know that the head of Hamas met with Raisi, the head of Iran, in June. They were very public about their discussion about the Gaza Strip and about what's happening with Israel. There's no attempt to even hide this. These are really tentacles of Iran. It's also no secret that the United States has moved its carrier fleet into our area, really. And I think what's important is to send a message, because it's going to take a while for that intelligence story really to come out. And certainly I'm not at liberty right now to go into this, but the U.S.'s involvement here is so important because that carrier fleet is really sending a message. We're not looking to get involved in any type of regional ramp up here. We are focused on Hamas and Gaza. And I think our support from the U.S. and other allies around the area, around the world, will hopefully send that as a very clear message to the other players in the region.
And if there were a direct line discovered through intelligence from Iran to this attack, what would be the implications for Israel?
I think that would probably need to be discussed by the defense establishment, not by me at this time.
International spokesman for Israel's Defense Forces, Major Doron Spielman, thank you very much for updating us this morning on Morning Joe.